All right, it looks like it's 1 after the hour, so let's get started. The agenda is pretty light today. I thought I'd start by retreading the OpenZFS Hackathon. I know I blobbed on about this last month a bit, but I thought since we have time, I would mention it again. And let me share my screen. Let me find the right
I was
window.
going to ask, do you have a Google spreadsheet or something again to
Yes,
try to
that is
organize
what
people?
I'm going to show you. If I can find the right thing to click on, sorry. Right, I don't see, right, I don't see why it's not showing up the right window there. So let me put the link in here because you all have editing access. So yeah, so there's a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet, oh, here we go. Now you're showing it to me. All right, now can you see the spreadsheet on the screen as well? Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's a spreadsheet like we had last year. The thing that's a little bit different about this year is that we'd like to try and do some more organization work before the hackathon, so that folks can like find other people to work with remotely, because it's all online conference this year. Um, so definitely feel free to like put in your ideas. If you're just working by yourself, that's cool too. Um, but if you would like help with some idea, then then what we'll try to do is set up like separate Zoom meetings for each project. So I've bolded the ones here of folks that have already committed to leading it. So like Josh is going to be leading a hackathon project about the pool compatible features. Seraphim is going to be leading a newcomer session for folks that are just getting started with development. And Mohammed, who you might remember from I think last year's hackathon, he was working with drives that have like multiple actuators. He is working on integrating ZFS and Minio, so he wants to lead a hackathon session on that. Um, so we need more folks who are interested in leading those hackathon sessions, and then we'll give you some time at the beginning of the day to just a few minutes to kind of pitch your idea and explain it to the whole group. And then you will be able to kind of lead that Zoom / Slack / whatever based online hackathon for that project. And then we'll come together again at the end of the day with everyone to do hackathon presentations. Questions about this? Anyone have an idea that they would like me to write down? All right, well, I'll leave that open. It should be, you should be able to add stuff to this using the link that I pasted. And what else did I want to share? Oh, this is the Newcomers Ideas. So these are smaller ideas, although I think some of these are pretty cool, legit, maybe not so small um, ideas, but ones that are require relatively less deep understanding of the ZFS internals to get started with them. So these are all great ideas too, and as well as some things that are not necessarily coding things, but documentation, debugging tools, stuff like that. All right, cool. Other questions about the 3 weeks from today conference? All right, I'm working on my slides, or at least the outline for my slides. Then the next item we have on the agenda is Richard per pool arc stats. Are you here?
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Cool. Yep. Go ahead.
I wonder if George is here or Adam
I see
I'm here.
George Wilson on the call. Yeah.
and the other George. There's too many Georges around
I
here.
don't see him on.
Yeah.
Like L2ARC George or whatever.
Yeah. So basically, there's been kind of a conversation. I think there's a pull request or two around statistics around L2 arc. And for those who may or may not know, the L2 arc was kind of bolted on and has this per pool configuration thing, but the arc itself and all the arc stats in it are global to the machine. And so we have this problem that some of us observability geeks would worry about, and that is, all right, what are the metrics, and am I actually seeing what I want to be seeing, and how do we think of the arc as a two-layer cache where one layer is pinned to your pool and the other layer is shared amongst pools. Now, without recommending a complete redesign of the arc, which will require significantly more tequila than I've had today, the idea is suppose instead of changing any of the existing arc statistics that we add in some meaningful statistics into the SPA stats. And for those of you who may or may not know, one of the things that came up through ZFS on Linux is a whole section of statistics for every pool. And we see those in, for example, if you do a Z pool status minus R, for example, you'll see a distribution. And that distribution is stored in the SPA stat structures. And so now we have a place to put things like per pool statistics. And so that would make a logical place to put them. But it is a fair amount of work. It's much more difficult than just adding an arc stat. But then again, the arc stats are hard to make per pool, right? How do I confer pool information in a simple name for an arc stat? It doesn't work very well. And so at this point, I think it's a thing of tossing out ideas. My thoughts is to keep the existing arc stats as they are. And then if we want to have more detailed information in the short term about per pools, then we have plenty of trace points and detrace probes in the various places that we can do that. But then in the long run, maybe we do want to collect then per pool L2 arc statistics, specifically L2 arc statistics. So I wanted to toss that out there and see if anybody had ideas or thoughts.
So, like, do you have an idea of which types of statistics?
Well, the one that came up from Adam was hits and misses.
Right. So, like in arc read, we have access to the SPA T of which we're trying to read, and so we would just, where we're currently incrementing the arc counter for hit or miss, we would also increment a SPA stat counter saying there was a hit or miss.
Basically, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
The hard part is changing the zpool command to spit it out for you. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you could.
Really hard.
I think there's a bunch of different ways that you could approach this in terms of the internals. I mean, one would be like you can create case stats, which is the SPL concept on demand, like the way that we've done with the object set stats that Seraphim added. So you could add like something that looks like a arc stat or is mostly the same as those, kind of just like, you could even just take all the arc stats or maybe break it down into like, here are the ones that are per pool and here are the ones that are global. And then the ones that are per pool, moving them into the per pool thing. and then maybe have some backwards compatibility to like add them up for the global one. That seems like it would be pretty straightforward. And then, you'd be left with getting the information the same way that we do today, essentially through the K-stats.
Yeah, that
The
definitely
alternative,
has a nice feel to it. The SPA stats are kind of painful to get, I think is the way I would describe it, compared to the K-stats, right? K-stats are right there, you can just read them.
Yeah, like
yeah,
I think on the Linux version, you would end up with a file named the same as the pool in some directory somewhere, and you cat it, and you would just get all the stats. And then on FreeBSD, you would have a nice OID tree of sysctls per pool with all the different stats, and I think that would work nicely. And
Yep.
would probably be the easiest one of the different options to do because it doesn't require any new zpool command line interface or anything like that.
Right, so there's no userland component whatsoever.
yeah. I
And
mean, unless you wanted to build that, right? Like you could optionally do that, just like the argstat command is built on top of the existing K-stats.
Right, and that's a Perl script or something, or a Python script, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I haven't looked in detail at how the implementation of the per pool like performance stats that are consumed by zpool iostat work now. But I mean, I can't imagine that they're like that much different or harder to implement. The one thing that would be nice, like if you're not just going to kind of go for the minimum possible work, it might be nice to think about how to do this in a way that will minimize the performance impact, because we
Yep.
have seen the arc stats and other kind of stats like become performance bottlenecks when you have high rates of bumping those, because they're all, they're either just like global variables essentially that get atomic added, or they're the agsum stuff that we added, which is pretty heavyweight, and could probably either use some improvement to the agsum code, or like looking at other options. Like I think that with I think was it the per dataset ones, Seraphim? There's something that some stat that you were working on.
Yeah, so it's the per data set exams. And I think like some time ago, I think it was Alexander Motin who also had some ideas about, making them better because they're pretty heavyweight, apparently.
You had, oh no, it was a different, it was not that, it was a different stat. It was like the
Oh, yeah, that was for
KMEM
the
stats where you ended up using a
statement
different,
cache statistics where we use the kernels. Think it was, I don't remember the exact name, but it's basically these per CPU statistics that they have, which are basically like the same as our exams.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm not like prescribing any one of those as being the right or best answer, but it seems like if I were going to be adding a bunch of new stats, I would probably if I was going to put in more than the minimum amount of effort to get it working, I would probably look at the performance implications before like before, making a nice WYSI GUI if I didn't have to.
Yeah, that's a good point because we've definitely seen, especially with the IO type stats, because
They're so frequently hit.
in in Linux they do it differently where we don't have to maintain consistency, but yeah, that's a little bit more heavyweight for those because there is consistency involved.
I think with the per object set ones, we only do the agsum when someone actually tries to read the kstat rather than constantly doing it.
Yeah, and that's
Like
good,
the
but
ARC ones, I think we do once a second or something, right?
yeah, and once a second is no big deal, but I think the issue is that the
Even
arc
just
stat,
collecting them into
even
the
just
agsum.
collecting the arc stat in the agsums, um, to drill in a little bit more on that, I think what we found was that the performance of the Linux's native like per CPU counters was better, primarily because they disable interrupts while adding it, so that they don't need a lock. because you can basically say like, it seemed like it was very lightweight to say, just keep running on this CPU. Don't let me get any interrupts while I bump up, while I figure out which CPU I'm on and then bump that count without having any, you don't need any atomic operations. You don't need any mutexes. So it seemed like that was maybe at the root of why that performed a lot better than the agsums.
And I think there's a similar concept on FreeBSD, and it might make sense to basically make egsums a wrapper around those two interfaces
Yeah.
via
Yeah.
the SPL.
Yeah, figure out how to either do that or like improve our implementation of agsums or something like that.
I think
Seems like
definitely
there's
because
a lot on the table there.
in this case, we're basically duplicating all of the arc stats per SPA. And so, if you have two pools, suddenly instead of bumping one counter, we're bumping 3 counters to count the same thing, basically.
Well,
And
it should only be bumping the counter of the pool that the access is
well,
for,
yes,
right?
I guess that's correct.
So
But
like maybe you're bumping the
always
global
double
one
it.
and the
Yeah.
pool
And the
specific
per
one.
SPA one, but that's, if egsums are a problem, then doing twice as many of them almost is something
Also
we
not
should
great.
look at and measure. And,
Right.
But I would really like to have those stats. I'm a sucker for more stats.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have those stats even on a per dataset basis, which I mean, there's like a little bit more nuance to what those numbers mean.
Yes,
But
that's
I
true.
think, because blocks can be shared between datasets. But
Yeah, we have to,
I would still love to see something along those lines where you could see like, oh, like this for this data set, the hit rate is X. For this other data set, the hit rate is Y.
I think the Z bookmark fizz that we get in arc read has
Yeah,
the
would tell you
obj
that.
set, right? And
Yep.
so it's
Yeah,
possible
you
we
just,
could actually start doing some of these as extend the per data set or per obj set ones, and that would be really interesting. There would be the caveat that, if it's a clone, then, whichever one you're reading gets counted as the hit or the
yeah.
miss.
But that's kind of what you
But
want
that's
anyways.
what you want anyway, exactly. I think the biggest use case that I've seen for the per data set ones are every customer has a data set, and I would like to know which customer is causing all the load.
Yep.
And just because you have more reads than the other customer doesn't mean, if all of yours are arc hits and all theirs are misses, then,
Yeah.
that tells you which one's causing all the I/O to the disk.
Yeah. There might be, I think that's a great idea. We might have to do a little bit of re-architecting there because I think that those per object set stats are handled at the ZPL layer. So
Currently,
we don't
currently
want the
because
arc
those ones are literally
reaching
reads
up.
a number of blocks,
Yeah.
but they just call into the data set kstats.c, which I think we would just have different functions to bump those counters. But yeah, I think looking at the overhead of those is important, but then unlocking all those extra stats would be really juicy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to too, obviously when we're in the thick of things in a performance problem, we go to dtrace or BPF trace, right? And we get our answer and we move on and forget those scripts. But that's a good way to find out how things might be useful, right? Because I think that's really what we're facing here, and that is the arc stats are in global useful, but in specifics not so useful.
Cool. Any other questions on this?
I appreciate the thoughts, guys.
Cool. Don, Brady, did you want to talk about this Z script?
Yeah, can I go ahead and share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, this is some work I'm doing. It kind of piggybacks off of a recent commit I did to remove duplicate events from the ZFS event stream. This one has to do with sort of retention. On Illumos, we had FMA logs, so all these events were retained, I think indefinitely. But on Linux, we currently have zpool events, and this is an example of a checksum array I just got, and it has quite a bit of information, but we don't retain it. So if you crash or over time, this will spill out of the, I think we only, there's n events that we save. So you'll lose this information. And we do have a thing called all syslog in Z, which will actually take this event and post it into the syslog. The problem with that is it's pretty terse. It just has like, you had to check some error on this pull on this VDEV. It doesn't give you any, this additional information about like, what object it was and, et cetera. So what I was thinking was just extending the all syslog to put additional information in there. And I'll give you an example of that. And I just wanted people's thoughts on, is this the best way to retain it? For me, it's kind of a simple way to do it, but let's see, what am I looking for? Sorry.
I think in general that yes, on FreeBSD we use devd to grab those same events and log them to syslog and run into the same problem with often they're too terse. Now we have a config file where you can define which of those extra fields go in there, and we've expanded them over time. But I think in general, erring on the side of providing a few too many of the variables rather than few gives you a lot more.
Yeah, so here's an example of what I have right now. So in addition to the pool and the VDEV, I can give you the size, offset. I recently added priority, which is useful because it has async versus sync and read, write, et cetera. So I just, is just extending all syslog good enough? I mean, I don't know if anybody depends on the current one, but it's actually, here's, these examples are, it just has, it's not that useful to say something happened, but no details. So would people be, would it be okay just to extend it to do more like this, where if there's information there within reason, in this case, everything related to a checksum I pushed out.
One of the things I've done, Don, is, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that those history events seem pretty useless as they are.
Yeah. Now we can configure. There's a configuration to you can ignore events, and so at least for our purposes, we'll ignore those. But for things like checksums, IO errors, faults, I think you want to have a little more specifics.
What is the purpose of the history event when you have no information there?
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of thought necessarily went into what output should get sent to the syslog initially. It was just set it up to get something logging, and then I don't think we ever went back and refined it basically. So everything got logged tersely by default. So I think it's great to go back and revisit, like, what should we be logging?
Yeah, this was my first stab at, something we could do. Like, basically, if there is information there, go ahead and post it. And we could even get fancier if we wanted to, but so I don't know if there's a problem with just making all syslog better, more extended versus, making that a configuration option where you can have the terse one. I don't know the value of the terse one, to be honest.
Having the terse one might break existing stuff, but I like the idea. I like having more information all the time, as you know.
I think you could likely mitigate most of the chance of having problems with existing stuff if you just make sure all the new fields are on the end and you don't change the order of the existing fields, so that if anybody's got a script that's awking out a value from the existing syslog or whatever, that it's still in the same place. And then if there's extra stuff on the end of the line, that's fine. Because I've found that useful. I had extended the one on FreeBSD for checksum errors to have, like you showed there, the offset and so on. So I could see if these checksum errors somebody was getting in a VM were always at the same offset, or if they were different each time. And at one point I went so far as to have the expected and actual checksum logged. So I could see, like, is one of these all zeros or something, and something's going on. And so I think having more information is almost always better.
Clearly, Dan, you need to re-implement, or Don, you need to re-implement ASL.
No, I like that's a good point. I think I can just append the way it was set up, and I can make a configuration that you can opt out of the extended mode, I suppose, if somebody wanted the old terse behavior.
In a similar vein, Don, I've got an influx DB interface to that, where it spits all that stuff out to influx DB. And we use that so we could correlate, obviously performance and trends to events.
Okay.
I got that around here somewhere. I don't know if it's up. I can push it up, obviously.
Okay. Sounds like just augmenting the current all syslog would be the direction. It sounds like it's going to be okay as long as I, append.
Yeah.
It should be fine.
And there's also a CEE standard for putting JSON into Syslog. That's understood by things like Splunk and Elasticsearch and those guys.
Is there a convention for people putting that in syslogs right now, or?
Yeah. But I don't know seriously how many people really do it in anger.
Yeah. For my purpose, I just want to be able to, in a postmortem, go see what's going on.
I think it'd be pretty reasonable too to turn off some of those less than helpful events over here, like the history stuff, right? I don't know that anybody really depends on that kind of stuff at the moment, so maybe prune it down to what's useful.
That one's pretty trivial. There's a config to say like don't exclude these, and then that one would be an optimal candidate for that because it doesn't give you any information, So
Yeah, I think selecting some better defaults while you're in there would be great.
Okay, I'll put up a review this week then on that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Don. So the last thing that I put on the agenda was to corner Brian and ask you to talk a little bit about the just an update on the OpenZFS 2.0 release candidate and schedule for that.
Yeah, so there was a 2.0 release candidate cut 2 weeks ago now, I think, something like that. I'm hoping to cut another release candidate this week. So we'll have an RC2 out, and then just a call for testers and letting it soak. And at the moment, we're just cherry picking critical bug fixes back from master into it, documentation updates, little safe stuff like that. But the intent is just to let it soak for a while, stabilize, make sure there's nothing comes up, and then get a final release. I'm not sure how many RCs that'll take, but hopefully not too many. And hopefully the changes we shouldn't have too many anymore.
And are you aiming to do a new RC every 2 weeks?
Yeah,
or
I think
on
that
any
would
sort
be,
of schedule.
there's no exact schedule, but I think 2 weeks would be pretty reasonable. And then I'm not sure how many RCs we need to go through until we're happy with it, but until we are happy with the quality of it, I would say. But yeah, I think every 2 weeks would be pretty reasonable. I was hoping to put one out, like I say, this week. So watch for that, and then by all means, pick it up and test it. I haven't heard of any bad issues in the current RC. Mainly, we've been adding patches for, like I said, little bug fixes, and then some stuff for FreeBSD still.
Do you think there's still time to get the boot once envy list pull request? That's
that one. Did that get reviews? I should go back and look.
Paul Dagnelli gave it a review. You marked it as accepted yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that one has the libzfs API changes around that, and we would like to not have 2.0 have something different than what we plan to go with long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know if there's any other FreeBSD related changes we should really pull in there, because it would be nice if that was very close to what you guys are running.
Yes, that's very much our goal, is to have OpenZFS 2.0's final version be what ships in FreeBSD 11 coming up. That'll be February or whatever. But
okay, well, definitely let me know if there's critical stuff there. I think there's a few changes outstanding still, but I think most of it's there.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions about the upcoming release? I think we're still on track for our plan before the end of the year. So I feel really good about that.
I think so. I mean, hopefully we shouldn't go through 20 or 30 RCs. That would be bad. I'm hoping for small single digits here would be good.
All right. Looks like we're going for a new record of early meetings. Anybody, other questions, comments, topics to discuss today? If not, then I hope to see you all at the conference. I would remind folks that I would ask you to register because the registration will send you a link to the Zoom on the registration. So if you register. So, and you'll need the Zoom link to participate, like ask questions live. Otherwise, we'll be live streaming on YouTube. And you know, anybody will be able to watch it live there, but they won't be able to like ask questions of the presenters during the conference. And then we'll also have like breakout sessions during the breaks that you'll be able to just chat, you know, free form chat with different folks in different like virtual rooms. That'll be like different Zoom conferences or Zoom meetings. And that'll be for for folks that register. So it's free registration. And I hope to see you all there. Thanks.